is the Electile Dysfunction Podcast with Ashton Cohen.
Hello, everyone. This is the Electile Dysfunction Podcast with Ashton Cohen. I have with me today Jason Szeftel. He is the host and of the China Unraveled Podcast and a writer. And we're going to be discussing China today and all the things that doesn't often get covered by the media, the issues they have in terms of demographics and energy and food scarcity problems, and how China's risen to where it is today and where it's headed. So, Jason, thank you so much for being with me today.
Thanks, Ashton. I'm glad to be on.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's going to be a fascinating discussion. I want to first start off with what I just referenced, which is, let's start with the demographics of China, because that's something that's often not given the attention that it should get. Obviously, they had the one China policy. They scrapped that. They made it into 2 children. And now recently they announced that they're going to be allowing, I think, up to 3 children, if I'm not mistaken. And that's to sort of combat a demographic crisis that they seem to be having. And that's projected to get worse. So could you talk to us a bit about what's going on with its demographics, how it's shaping their policies, and where it's going to lead to?
Yeah, sure. So you're definitely right. It's definitely heading in a very bad direction. But to give people context, I'm going to bring this sort of way back. And you referenced food scarcity. So how does any country get the population that it has, right? How does Germany get like 80 million? How do you get that number, right? How does the US get to 330? Well, it actually comes back to agriculture. The function of how much food, it's kind of obvious, right? How much food you can make in a certain area. It's related to the agricultural land, sort of produce you make, et cetera. And from there, you get the number of people you can sort of sustain on any given piece of land. And so India and China, historically, the reason they were so large for so long, and just in terms of population, they have a large agricultural sort of zone that they can use. And in Chinese history, agriculture is very volatile. That's one way to think about it. The main northern basin in China is called the North China Plain, and that region has very volatile sort of rain, moisture, and food cycles. So we just saw like a massive flooding in the western part of the North China Plain. They basically got a year's worth of rain in one day. It's catastrophic flooding, the sort of thing you don't see almost anywhere else on Earth. It's some of the both of the worst natural disasters in history that aren't plagues are floods of the Yellow River. They're absolutely catastrophic. Nothing's really like them on Earth. And well, that makes it kind of hard to get your food system oriented correctly, right? That's one way to think about it. And China has this boom and bust cycle with its population. They do really well. Everything's going great. They're building it all up. They get to irrigate all this land. It's all going great. And then typically you get a massive flood, and then it would all break down. You get waves of migration, cholera, famine, disease, and it would chaos, often causing the collapse of whatever empire happened to be in existence. But starting in the 1940s and 50s, things changed. You got new technologies. You got like steel, cement, concrete, real dams. You could build all sorts of new things China had never been able to do before. So that's kind of what happened. So that really stabilized and expanded the food production in China more. And you also got fertilizers later on. And that really, big boom, really good thing for China. But at the same time.
Sorry, this was the 40s and 50s?
So after the communist revolution in 1949.
The Great Leap Forward and all that?
Ooh, no. So don't consider this like a nameplate move. This was just a general function of having more modern materials. So that would involve building small dams all around the country and stuff like that. The actual Great Leap Forward was a disaster.
Right. That's what I was wondering. Yeah.
So that's like a failed industrialization thing. Totally bonkers. But this is just a general thing. They were able to use basic modern technology. They used to build dams out of like bamboo and some sticks and stuff, and it would just like emulsify over time. So it would just constantly need. Anyway, we don't get into that too much. But basically, what happened starting in the 50s, Mao actually had a program to basically breed for the motherland, is a way to think about it. He was worried that the U.S. was going to start nuking everything in China. This is from 1950s, early Cold War policy. This is with the Korean War, and there was actually basically expansion, sort of a demographic expansion policy, which is actually very typical with new Chinese states. The new emperor or Mao comes in, and they basically want to expand the population. They want to increase the labor force. They want to have more tools at their disposal to do all their imperial project stuff. But what happened with Mao is that after that baby boom in the 1950s, the Chinese state hit a major, I don't even know how to say this, like an inflection point, a real problem point, late 1960s and then through the 1970s. So what was basically happening is China's demography was going out of control. Not fertilizers, but all these new technologies and inputs were just creating an enormous population. There's no contraceptive, there was nothing. And so what happened in the late 1970s, around when the US sort of had a rapprochement with China. China was in dire straits, and basically this is what would have happened if they had continued to try and do like you said, the Great Leap Forward, this bizarre attempt at industrialization in the backyard sort of thing. If they had continued to do that, if they had continued to not have any contraceptive policies or any demographic controls, and they had never gained access to modern chemicals and fertilizers from the United States, China would have seen basically population corrections, like the world had never seen. Their food was absolutely hitting a point where the population was hitting a point where the food could not match, and they would that would have been like, it was the sort of thing that would have made Malthus curl into a ball into the fetal position to try and avoid, right? And so this is where you get the one-child policy. I am not defending the one-child policy. It's barbaric. It basically led to the abortion of something like 300 million people around the population of the United States. And that was absolutely insane. And it was a very barbaric policy on the ground as well. But what we're seeing now are the bitter fruit of that policy. So the one-child policy allowed China to develop in a way it probably wouldn't have been able to otherwise, because the more people you have, the more problems you have in a lot of ways. You have to feed, clothe, house, educate, all that. But what this did is basically throughout the late 80s, 90s, into the 2000s, China had a demographic dividend. So imagine the largest workforce in human history that's all young, healthy, doesn't need any health care, doesn't need any pensions, any social security. It's huge. It was, I mean, a lot of reasons why the labor costs were low, but really cheap young workers is a big one. Of course. And well, that ended around 10, 12 years ago. Well, 13, 14 years ago now. And ever since, China's been trying to figure out what on earth they're going to do, because they now have, like you referenced, there was a one-child policy, then they actually expanded to the two-child policy, and now they have a maximum of 3 children per person. But the ship has already sailed. No country has ever, no modern advanced industrial nation has ever been able to correct a demographic contraction like we're seeing. And no country has ever done it anywhere near the scale China has. And there's some basic reasons. I mean, a big reason why this is so difficult is that a lot of it relates to urban space, to, female employment, to female priorities, and all of these things that you can't correct with very bare bones economic.
And it's a general trend throughout the entire world as well.
Entire world,
So especially with Europe and America's, I think, seems to be the best of the major countries.
Although that's getting pretty bad too.
And it's also becoming issues here.
Tiny number of children.
Right.
The question I always encourage people to ask is forget 2.1 children. That is a bogus, bizarre economic nonsense, right? It's a little, you can't have that. You get, single digits, you get 1, 2, or 3. Ask how many people that are having 3 children or more.
Right,
That's
of course.
The question where you see it
not many.
Not many, right?
Yeah. Particularly with spaces getting more confined. I'm sure it's the same issue with many of the cities in China, where you have a limited amount of space by which you can have an apartment, and you're confined spaces. You can't have these rolling houses like in Texas or something, right?
Yeah. So Seoul, South Korea is the worst, has the worst demography on earth, and it's exactly what you said. So many people, a huge percentage of the population is in Seoul, and they're in tiny, tiny, tiny apartments. Right. You can't have 3 kids in a tiny apartment. It's almost impossible.
Same in Japan and Hong Kong. Yep. Yeah.
So China's, and if you go to China, they have a huge number of cookie cutter industrial cities with tiny, massive apartments, and it's extremely difficult. And this is, the demographic problem seeps into almost every area of life, whether it's rural workers, whether it's the agricultural sector, whether it's the attempt to continue to staff large manufacturing hubs in the southern coast. It just goes on and on. And everything, including all the stuff we mentioned, a large population means you have to house, clothe, feed all these kind of people. But if you're actually able to do so, it gives you a big boost. So U.S. economic growth since 1970, since then, it's been about half of it has come from population growth. And once China got going, there's a similar dynamic, at least in the sense of filling the needs of all of its people.
Right.
Now, what if you have to build less homes every year? And then you need less products. And it's a downward spiral.
It's also an issue too with respect to their entire economy is based on exports. So they are going to have less people who are first of all, it's exports and consumption, right? So there's going to be less people to consume the manufactured Chinese goods just by nature of less kids and a population that's dwindling in size. And then on top of that, the rest of the world's having less kids. So then, and the populations are getting older, the ones who are around. So then you have less people consuming their stuff as well. And that sort of reverberates into making their economy weaker as well, right?
Yeah. So the Chinese economy, like you said, the export sector is a major place where they get hard currency. It's one of the most dynamic, 3 or 4 of the most dynamic parts of the Chinese economy. And not only are there going to be fewer foreign consumers all around the world, there's also going to be, it's going to be much harder to access these foreign markets. So we're now saying basically buy American, buy Chinese, buy European stuff all over the world. Well, that means goodbye global export markets for China.
Right.
It's extremely difficult. And the major way that China's been trying to deal with this is to move to, like you said, more of a consumption-based economy. But consumption is also very tied in with these demographic trends, right? If you have 45-year-olds who don't have any kids and they're just saving up nest eggs, where's your consumption?
Yeah, exactly.
There is none.
Right.
So huge problem. It's none of it's going to, I mean, just to be blunt, like it's actually much easier to prevent people from having children.
Of course, yeah.
Than, because you can't make someone care for
you
something.
Can't make someone, exactly.
Years.
Right. You can't make someone have kids, yeah.
It's real tough. So
yeah,
that's definitely the main thing. I think just for your audience to know that knowing the background about demography and food supply, it seems very in the background. Oh, that's so basic. It's so obvious, it doesn't matter. But these things really matter. And the stability of the Chinese agricultural system is worrisome, to say the least. And there's another thing, just the entire Chinese agricultural workforce is old, roughly 60-year-old people, and there's no one to replace them. And you're not going to get someone to move back to the fields after they've lived in the city. And that's, you know what I mean? It goes against the entire notion of progress in modern China. So
they're so old largely because China emphasized bringing these people out of the rural villages where they were doing agriculture, putting them into factories, and then hopefully educating them as well. And so now the only people sort of left behind are the ones who've, came from a different era, raised into that. And now you can't really go backwards, right? No one's going to go back to these rural villages after they're used to living in places like Beijing or Shanghai, etc.
Yeah. So the workforce, that massive Chinese workforce that we were talking about, it mostly came from the rural. I mean, everything in China was rural like 30 years ago. It was a what would they call it? The rural. I mean, basically like a rural transition. You're basically moving from a rural to the rural to urban transition. We're basically moving these people into cities. And at the start, they're just moving there to work in factories. They're starting to, do the basic manufacturing stuff. And the reason they were able to do this originally is because the agricultural productivity and efficiency of Chinese agriculture basically went up because they had fertilizers. Chinese agriculture is terribly, terribly, terribly inefficient. The thing that makes it work, the only reason it works, is because you have enormous amounts of agricultural, industrial chemicals that are juiced. Like basically, the Chinese countryside is juiced with steroids, and that's how you produce a lot of food. And that is why you were able to have less workers, like you said, less people in the fields.
Right.
But you're not going to be able to get those guys to come back. Although it's just a huge challenge. I mean, if you do that, you start to mess with the manufacturing sector. I mean, they want to automate a lot of these things. They want to replace a lot of these workers with automated systems. But there's capital costs. There's, total management transformations, technological transformation. All this needs to happen. And this is not how a lot of these old school manufacturing stuff in China was done, right? I'm not talking about the major tech companies. Those are advanced. Those are modern. But to try to do this en masse for the entire Chinese manufacturing sector is near impossible, especially if you can use those same automated processes in other countries that are now reticent to let the next wave of manufacturing also occur in China based on what happened from the last wave.
One of the things you mentioned, which is really interesting, was that China has less arable land per capita than Saudi Arabia. Is that right? That's an insane stat. Saudi Arabia is a desert. Why they have such little arable lands? Because all the mountains and they've destroy their local environment? Why they have because they're about the size of America, and America has obviously, I think, the most arable land in the world, next to India. But they have basically what you said, 7%. They're 20% of the world's population. They have about 7% of the arable land.
It's around 21% and 21, 20, and 7. And the key thing in that stat is per capita. It's this huge. So basically, since the 1500s, China has been increasingly overpopulated. The reason why is actually remember the Columbian Exchange, where you got like potatoes going to Europe and tomatoes, all that kind of stuff.
Right.
Well, that also went to China at the same time, and it particularly brought potatoes, it brought yams, it brought stuff like that, and that actually did a huge boost to Chinese agriculture. It took a lot of marginal land that originally you couldn't grow anything in, and it made it productive, and that made a huge boost to the population basically in the last 500 years. And what that has done is strained the entire Chinese landmass, basically, with the people. Because like you said, most of China is not good for agriculture. It is deserts, basins, plateaus, all that. It's junk land. Basically the good land that you can farm on in China is roughly the size of state of Colombia in South America.
Oh, okay.
That's about the size for the good land. That's the non per capita sort of thing, right? It's
right.
Size in terms of states. But again, you also mentioned something really important. All this industrialization, all of this agrochemical infused steroiding of the countryside, all of this is creating massive, massive problems. Basically, China's paved over a lot of its land. A good way to think about it is imagine if in America, the New York, the whole Boston, New York megalopolis, that whole Boswash corridor, imagine if that was sitting on top of the Midwest. And so every time you expanded the cities, you were getting rid of a lot of the best land. That is exactly what's happening. It has happened already in China. They've paved over most of their great land.
Yeah, so they don't have a Midwest, basically, right? They have
not.
Yeah.
No. Once again, the North China Plain and the Yangtze Basin are the two main areas, but these are just heavily, heavily populated. Like you said, like that's where you want to live in China. So that huge population, those 1.4 billion people, they're all stuffed into this region. So you're really like, it's really, really funny. You can go on Google Earth, Google Maps, and just go into China, go somewhere south of Beijing, just go down a little bit and just zoom in, and you will see, farmland, and then every a couple meters, you'll see little patches of little villages. Like it's crazy. If you go to the Midwest, you'll see cities. You don't see little thing. It's mind-boggling because again, it's the scale. The thing with China that makes everything so difficult is scale. Certain things scale well, but most things don't when it comes to countries, right? This is why India is perennially poor. They never managed to get the sort of accelerants together like China did at that key period when you could have done it. Now that's gone. It's not going to happen. And to do it with so many people is just, and every year more people are in India, it becomes more difficult. So it's a major challenge. And China should be credited for what it's managed to accomplish. Nobody thought they would get this far in the 1990s. Absolutely. Nobody thought.
Probably the most unprecedented increase in human capital and livelihood and coming out of poverty in world history.
Oh, for sure. And I mean, something like 75% of all the great gains in sort of modern human rights, political advancement, economic increase, all of this is 75% of it comes from China.
Yeah,
just removing the poverty in China is enormous.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
My favorite thing when you speak to some people in China, just talking about scale, is you'll say, "Oh, where are you from?" Like, "Oh, I'm from a small town of 10 million people."
Yeah, enormous.
It's insane the scale, right? I mean, none of us ever heard of Wuhan. 99% of people haven't before this whole pandemic, and that's what, like 10 million people or something as well.
Yeah, Wuhan's enormous.
Huge.
It's actually a
very advanced city. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's so many cities like that.
Yeah, so China built something like over 600 major cities in the last 30
unbelievable.
Years. Enormous. I think over 100 have over 1 million people. So it's wild.
How are they going to get the energy to basically provide for these cities, right? Because China has, despite being one of the biggest nations on earth, the top 5, they are actually pretty destitute when it comes to energy resources relative to their size. Yeah. And they're going to have to get those from other places. So how are they going to deal with that? What's that situation looking like for them?
Well, it's a dilemma. So somewhere in the early 2000s, one of the Chinese prime ministers or presidents called this problem the Malacca dilemma.
Right.
Basically,
there's Hu Jintao.
Yeah. And Hu Jintao basically said, the only place we can get this oil or hydrocarbons basically is from the Middle East. Right. And so the only way it gets there is if it rolls all the way through Southeast Asia, past India, all that. And that means you have to have pretty good relations with all of those countries. Yeah. Well,
let's start for a second because I want to put the map up for the viewers when this comes. The Malacca Strait, it's unbelievable. It's like, so the narrowest point is like 1.7 miles. It's a tiny, tiny little strait in between like Singapore and Malaysia, and almost all of China's energy has to come through this little thing because of Indonesia's scattered with all the islands, so you can't go around those. You have to, all the energy they get, like 80% of it has to come through this tiny little strait, which is probably like the biggest, I would say, in terms of fragility from a geopolitical context, is I can't think of something that's worse, right? So it would be incredibly easy for the United States or anyone else to be able to shut that strait off. It's tiny. And then China's screwed. 80% of their energy comes from there.
Yeah, it's the choke point, right?
Yeah.
It's the choke point for Chinese energy supplies, and they've known that for over 20 years. The what to do about it though is it's kind of hard to figure that out. So a lot of things related to the South China Sea are also related to this. So everything China does in the South China Sea is not only focused on the Malacca Strait, but also controlling this entire region. So basically, what if you could control everything up to the Malacca Strait, right? That puts you in a much better position.
Right.
And also there's also hydrocarbon exploration you can do, in the South China Sea.
Internally.
So that adds it. Yeah, you could do basically offshore oil drilling, stuff like that.
I see. Okay.
They have all these islands that are both military bases and also energy extraction. If
They built some of these islands too, is that right? In the South China Sea? And that's largely for this to avoid this problem that you're discussing, right? The Malacca Strait problem, where they can have enough of a presence around there so that they can get their oil and their energy and their goods into the country without, facing a terrible amount of blowback, or having at least a presence there to be able to deal with whatever comes.
Yeah, so China's, one of its main problems is that its coastline it's hemmed in by countries all the way down. So if you go starting up north, you got Korea, just right there across from Beijing. Then you get Japan, where someone like Nagasaki's about online with Shanghai. And you got to go down there and you have Taiwan, right? And then you have the Philippines, and it's just on and on and on. And then Vietnam.
Yeah. And none of these countries like them very much either, right?
None of them like it. But the thing the South China Sea would give them is some breathing space, basically. It gives you some, so you look at the United States, there's nothing from California all the way to Hawaii, Midwest. There's nothing there, right? There's no Germany, or there's no Japan dangling off the coast, or Britain off the East Coast, right? It's a big thing. And it gives you a lot of freedom. China has no maritime freedom anywhere in any direction. And that's really a problem. Well, it's a problem for the last 1,000 years of Chinese history, but it's also really a problem, particularly if you're trying to be a modern, advanced industrial nation where everything runs on energy.
Right.
So like you said, China has basically been tapping out its oil reserves. The thing that China really has, it has some gas, it has some shale gas, but it's extremely difficult to extract. It's also in southern China, which is mercilessly hilly and rough, just to build the infrastructure. Like shale oil has all these like feeder lines. You basically need pipelines kind of go crisscrossing in every direction. And so West Texas, great place to do that. There's nothing there. Trying to do that in southern China is, again, near impossible. It's just mountains.
That's my next question. I was going to ask, why don't they frack? But it's because of the natural topography makes it very difficult to do.
Yeah, and then underground, it's also more difficult shale formations.
I see.
More complex. So you're above ground and below ground. It's also enormous amount of money. So they have plans to try and do a shale thing. They were trying to hit some numbers for last year, but they're scaling it way back. They don't plan to be able to rely on that. What kind of happened in the U.S. was pretty unique. It doesn't look like it's going to happen in a similar way in many other places. So China's really stuck with coal. China uses more coal than the rest of the world combined.
Wow.
And coal is really what made China possible. Like all these manufacturing industries that we were talking about. I mean, a big one these days is solar panels. Solar panels, you have to refine silicon into polysilicon. That takes a lot of energy. And so they have a huge string of coal plants in Xinjiang and Inner Mongolia.
Renewable energy.
Yeah, to make renewable energy.
And the electric batteries as well, right?
Correct. Yeah. Well, there's a whole chain for that, but anything. The great thing about coal is that it's cheap. It's so cheap. You have so much. It's everywhere. Basically, all around the North China Plain, west and north, it's just ringed by coal. And most of the rail lines in northern China actually are just all about bringing coal into the major industrial areas. And what coal lets you do is expand this massive industrial base like we've never seen before. That's what it did. Right. The problem is that originally China thought global warming was just a hoax by the West to try and stymie its rise, right? Total BS. Like, this is just the West trying to keep us down. And then they realized that their entire population is disturbed by the level of environmental chaos and destruction all around them. So now they've really embraced it, at least rhetorically. But weaning China off of coal, like how on earth do you do this? And the renewable energy problem, everyone talks about renewable energy in China, and it's very impressive, but the solar panels China makes go to the rest of the world. This is an export industry we're talking about. Hard currency. It's not about, I mean, they do go to China as well, but China, again, is a great place. You and I were both in LA. One of the best places on earth to do solar panels is the Mojave Desert. It is it's like basically the Sahara Desert in terms of solar radiation, and it's right next to a major population center. You just don't see that almost anywhere. And it's basically nowhere in China. So where you do see a lot of solar panels in China is Xinjiang, Western China, places where you need massive transmission lines to bring it to the rest of the country. China's actually innovating and creating, these enormous, like ultra high frequency direct current transmission lines. They're trying to bring all of this energy in direct current. So it's all in one direction. Just
from the solar panels?
From solar panels, yeah. From wind and solar. So wind is the same thing. Most of the wind is in the western deserts. Where
It's not a terribly efficient way to get energy anyways. Wind.
No, wind, they're expanding it. It's got a threshold, but wind turbines are getting pretty big, and you can do, if you do use batteries and you can work things out, you can make it pretty efficient. You can
The
make
batteries are so expensive, and putting up the turbines is so expensive, and then transmitting them across is so expensive, and then you can't. The battery capabilities right now are so expensive and limited, and then you have to clear out entire fields, right? So what do they get from solar and wind to combine? Like a couple % right now of their energy needs? China.
Oh yeah. No, it's tiny. I mean, that's again, like you said with agriculture, it's the scale. China uses 50% more energy than the United States, more than 50 now. Like we're talking huge numbers.
Mm-hmm.
It's like to move the needle. Solar panels are not moving the needle for decades. It's too much energy. Like the scale of how much you'd have to build out. And the thing about energy is that you have to integrate it all into the system. And so, like I was saying, these massive transmission lines you want to bring from Western China, these create enormous energy reliability challenges, which is some of what you were referencing. If you want to do this in large scale all across China, to make that work is going to take a very long time, because otherwise you'd see massive blackouts. Mm-hmm. There's no other way. You get weird wind things, you get weird, cloudy days, you get extra energy use, you get hot days, all these factors. So basically like we were talking about geography earlier, and the geography in southern China and all this, when you're using things that are renewable and using the sun, using the wind, every little geographic and climatic element can come together to cause a problem. Every little thing matters. How much sun is there today? How much all these things. So it creates challenges. I think it can be useful. The key to all this is batteries. If you can get batteries that store for days, that can release their energy for many days. There's some research into iron batteries. They basically be able to release the charge for like 10 days straight. So it'd give you a continuous rush onto the grid. You could do things, and there's a lot of innovation in batteries.
But even with those, you have to back up the solar and the wind with something like natural gas or oil
So personally for China, I think China's best bet is nuclear energy.
Right. That's what I was about to ask. Why haven't they gone all in on nuclear?
So they are going all in, but nuclear is a very challenging industry because it is so capital intensive. So that's just like the big one in England, it's like $20 billion for a single plant, right? And you just basically have no economies of scale. They're like individual Baroque, energy facilities you build, to spec each time. So they're just billions of dollars. Right. It's very hard to get economies of scale. And if you mess this up, you get a Fukushima, you get something like that, it could set back this whole process for decades. Like China knows, there was actually just recently a problem in a plant in southern China, and it was using new technology with France, and it became a bit of a problem because there's basically a worry, like, is this thing about to melt down? And nuclear just has a massive stigma around it in the United States, from Mile Island. And personally, I think we should for sure be innovating and advancing nuclear technology.
Absolutely.
Make it safer, make it smaller if you want as well, to make it, smaller scale for smaller regions. Do anything to create economies of scale. I think it's extremely important. And again, there are also new challenges coming. So nuclear needs a lot of water, so they're typically along the coast. That's why you see things like California. That's why we have it right near San Diego. That one that's down now. That's why Fukushima. There's all these things, and they do need to improve this stuff. But there's really just not enough innovation. I mean, it looks like the next wave of new nuclear is coming maybe around 2030.
Okay.
Sucks. So China's kind of out of luck on that one.
Yeah.
You don't want to be expanding some massive build out of stuff that might be obsolete, possibly more dangerous, possibly make you look like a fool. So yeah. But that was sort of my conclusion as well. Their best bet for sure is nuclear. I think that they use solar is an export industry. I think people should really keep that in mind. It's, I think something like 80% of the panels installed in the U.S. come from China. And China needs these export industries. They really do. They need a hard currency. So you referenced earlier the fact that China has all these cities. And it's not just energy that they need. They actually need, cement, asphalt. So there's many things they do in China. So steel, you do all this manufacturing and sort of refining and processing in China. But almost without exception, all of these require enormous amounts of energy, right? So if you're doing all this steel production, well, you're paying for it with your energy imports. That's kind of how it goes. But there's also things like asphalt, semiconductors, all these things. You still need to keep all these cities sustained and going. To do that is really changing the financial and currency profile in China. So China's now a major importer of a huge swath of products, like of products and goods. It's wild. We still think of China as an exporter.
Yeah, right. So where are they importing? What are the biggest things they're importing?
From everywhere. So China, bunch of minerals, bunch of metals, bunch of chemicals, bunch of semiconductors are the big one that's in the news now because it's so important. But almost everything. Remember, China's been a major civilization for a very long time. So a lot of like old resources that we've used for a long time are relatively tapped out. The U.S. didn't have that, and then they've just done an industrial expansion like the world has never seen. Right. you're really at it. What they want to do is a lot of what they try to do is diversify as well. So it's not always that there's a particular crunch with say like copper in China, but you don't want to deplete, you don't want to just go for broke on all of your resources when you can get it cheaper elsewhere and sort of slow the curve and soften the curve. So that's what they're trying to do, but it's really impacting the current account in China. So basically balance of imports and exports, and a lot of that relates to how many dollars are coming in, yuan are going out. And historically it's been dollars coming in, coming in. We leverage those dollars. We invest in all this infrastructure, boom, boom, boom. This is how we expand. This is how we build out, export oriented industrialization is what it's been called since Japan first did it in the 1950s and 60s. And that's what China did on a way crazier scale. But once you start importing at the scale they're doing, things change. And China actually is a net, the current account is red. So all the stuff they have to buy is starting to balance out. Forget the pandemic for a minute. That changed things the last 2 years. But all of this is impacting just the basic financial picture in China. So when you see starting in 2015, massive capital controls coming into China, down in China, preventing any purchases over $1 billion for major Chinese companies, preventing Chinese individuals from taking more than 50 grand out of the country, et cetera, down the line. You're seeing a country that is trying to keep capital in China because it needs it there. You can't have individuals and businesses always flowing money all over the place. No,
you're in LA as well, and how much of the luxury real estate here is owned by Chinese people? It's a lot. It's a lot of basically current Chinese people who are associated with the government who come here and they buy up a lot of real estate here. They buy up a lot of London. So that's the capital flight we're talking about.
Yeah. So I actually did a podcast on this. I'm actually going to turn it into an article because just for California people, but yeah, there's a huge splurge in just foreign real estate. And that ended in 2015, 2016, just all this stuff came down. But yeah, I mean, the great thing in LA to think about is the Oceanwide Plaza in downtown LA. There's a 3-building complex right near the Staples Center that was built. It was built by a company called Oceanwide, blah, 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 blah. Basically, everything the rug got pulled out from under that company. And that 3-building complex has been a unfinished ghost town for 2 or 3 years now. You can see it right next to the Staples Center. It's half constructed and they're trying to sell it. Yeah. And it was marketed to foreign Chinese, domestic Chinese who wanted foreign residences. Right. If you go to LA at night, go to downtown LA and just see how many lights are on around 7:30, right? It's a good way to see. Maybe that's a second home, right? Maybe they're just using it to get the capital gains appreciation. Right. So that's a lot of what we're seeing. A lot also around the world, a lot of countries responded to this by creating basically foreign purchase taxes for real estate. Singapore did it. Vancouver did it. A bunch of places did it.
Foreign purchase taxes, so they add taxes if you're a foreigner?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So people in the U.S. have thought about this as well. People are more concerned with things like housing security, more on the left. Right. They're concerned with, well, are we destabilizing local housing markets by allowing unlimited foreign access to these markets with what I mean? And there's a good argument to be made, actually, regardless of the policy choice anyone wants to make about whether you want to tax it. It's almost certainly true in major sort of gateway cities for capital, New York, LA, Santa Monica, San Francisco, Seattle. This is clear, 100% clear.
Yeah, 100%.
The question about what you do about it is different. But a lot of places like Singapore that are just smaller, right? They can't afford it. So they knock it out right away. It's a city state. So that's what they did. But we're going to see, there's also, it's totally unrelated, but there's other problems with the housing market around the world, and particularly in the US, because it's becoming financialized now to such a degree.
Right, the whole BlackRock.
It's becoming, you're making this market more liquid, but you're also making it less of a natural market. And so there's a real tension there that isn't being addressed or solved or looked at. And yeah, it's a problem. China,
makes sense,
In China, just as a little reference for people to keep in mind, roughly speaking, 25% of the Chinese economy is invested in or related to real estate. So,
right. Yeah, Shanghai is one of the most expensive real estate markets in the world, if not the most. I think it's in the top 3 for sure.
Oh my God. The sort of price to income ratios, I actually just saw it. I can't remember what they are, but they're multiples higher than anything in the West. Like something like 30, 40 times the income is the average house in something like Shanghai. It's wild. And so in China, the thing to always keep in mind about China is that this is a very hierarchical state from the top down. And that includes all these cities. So let's say you and I lived in some small city. Let's just say like we lived in Hangzhou, which is actually a very, very nice city, but whatever. There's tiers. There's tier 1 cities. There's tier 2 cities. There's tier 3 cities. And you and I can't just move to Shanghai. Shanghai's closed. It's now off limits. It is basically, the government has said, we're full. And you can't move. So there's a very ancient system actually.
How do they enforce that?
it dates back to the Han Dynasty. They have something called the hukou system, which is primarily geared towards rural migrants. It basically, there's flows of people all around China, right?
Right.
Since the 80s, 90s, going to the factories, back to the fields and back and all that. Well, they needed to figure out who was where. And so they basically located, they have basically you're registered to where your village is, and they use that to manage what you get. So let's say you and I were poor laborers in Chinese countryside. We moved to Shanghai 30 years ago. We wouldn't get access to the same resources as natural Shanghai residents. We get less of everything, education and all that, housing. And that's how they do it. They basically, you're rooted to where you are. There's no mobility in China the way we think about. I mean, there is, but it's really, especially now that it's industrialized, that era has passed. So ancient China, like the roads in ancient China were imperial roads. You're not allowed to use them like the freeways in the US. You know, just random citizens don't just roll down the road. No.
Oh, really?
No.
I didn't know that. Okay. So you can't
arteries,
even roads.
Well, no, modern China you can.
Oh, modern China you can. Okay.
So yeah, ancient, I'm just trying to say that
I see.
historically, transportation infrastructure was the arteries of imperial control. They were not public goods. As they needed to expand, basically primarily for logistics reasons, to bring goods, assemble parts, all the stuff for the manufacturing, they had to build a basic thing. But the transportation, people should just always keep in mind that mobility is not the same in China as it is in the US. You can do all these things, but try to have a car in Shanghai, right? So there's, I mean, just as a totally separate note, the Chinese transportation sector is one of the most overbuilt out things on the face of the earth. Just think about it. China has a lot of people. That's fair. But you're building out massive airports, massive rail systems, massive road systems, massive every kind of system possible. Because, I mean, but it's like, yes, we'll do everything. But it's like, you're also oversaturating everything. Like you don't, so basically no Chinese rail lines, except for major ones, a couple major cities, make a profit, right? It's purely, at this point, investment for investment's sake. And this is one of those areas where it's the level of misallocated capital is just astronomical. And I think people in the US will always look at this and they'll say, well, Jason, we can't build anything. So I'd rather have too many high-speed rail lines rather than precisely zero that costs $80 billion and goes nowhere in California. So that's a really fair argument. But again, it's this question of misallocated capital ever since China has sort of tapped out this industrial boom. Roughly speaking, we're talking the global financial crisis is when all of this, you started to reach the inflection point where China started to keep things moving and keep the engine running. It just started to grease the entire system with credit, like to insane levels. Right. I mean, you've heard these numbers, but yeah, it's very important. So I always want to get people a sense of that.
What's the deal with the ghost towns? Is that, I remember hearing about them 3 years ago. I would see these pictures of these entire planned communities that were completely empty with skyscrapers of residential units. Is that a problem right now?
Yeah. So China, the real estate sector, all of it runs on a build it and they will come model, right? Okay. Because you had to. I mean, you needed to build so much. You had to pray that it was going to happen. And again, roughly till 2008, 2010, this worked, right? People did move into all this stuff, roughly speaking, but now they're making some investment choices that are just nonsensical. So in Tianjin, there's a major new corporate industrial sort of business district that is totally empty. And the problem with getting a read on this ghost town problem, this ghost city problem, this ghost office problem, is that China is becoming very good these days in almost North Korea style at managing perceptions. So let's say you hear about a ghost town that's unfilled. Well, watch it fill itself. Watch it fill itself within a year.
Yeah.
So
like the fake food in the markets.
Yeah, it's
that's what North Korea does.
Yeah, I mean, China's much more sophisticated than North Korea, much more modern, advanced, industrial, all that. But
there's no blank computer screens where Xi Jinping is sitting in front of.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. But what China is just very nervous. It's tense, nervous, scared, and it's becoming increasingly rigid and intolerant, right? We're all seeing that just through the Xi Jinping presidency. Right. And perception management is becoming enormous there. So you're seeing the party is beginning to infiltrate everything again. So back in the 1970s, you just had, we can't even conceive of this because the party doesn't mean anything to the people in the United States. They're like, oh, what does that mean? Basically, the government is the front, and then the party is the government, right? That's one way to think about it. Like you have all these jobs, and they're just kind of functionaries, and there's party officials that actually make decisions. Bizarre system, it's hard to kind of describe in a couple words, but and basically the way it worked until privatization and sort of westernization, opening itself up in the late 1970s, early 80s, is that party officials ran everything. If you and I wanted to go get food down the street, we'd probably be asking a party. We'd probably be using either credits, quotas, something for party officials. Our housing would be given by them. Our education would be given by them. It's just everything. And so part of the process of opening up the country meant opening up unwinding this massive tight grip the party had on everything, all these goods that were being provided, services. But now that's the party's rolling back into force, right? Because China had just had its 100th anniversary. It has these grand plans to be, number one, top dog, everything. But the party wants the credit, right? The party, you can't be behind the scenes anymore. So you're seeing, a major thing, we could talk about the tech crackdown going on with all their major companies, but what's also going on is, Jack Ma, for example, he mouthed off. You can't mouth off in China anymore.
Yeah.
And so you get taken to the back room, probably slapped around a little bit, told what to say, told not what to say, and then you come out transformed. And also across the tech sector, the CEOs are becoming party officials. That's the easiest way to do it. Just become a member of the party, do it. Party cells and committees are being formed across all of these organizations. And there's party monitoring and retrieval of information, control of information, all of it is just seeping into everything again. And people should be aware of this because, if people have businesses, if people have doing anything in China, this is just becoming a major problem. So
I remember there's a scene in, have you seen the show Chernobyl, the miniseries on HBO?
Yeah, I did.
Do you remember that scene where she was a nuclear scientist and she was urging that he was just like a fat party official in the Soviet Union who was basically in charge of making the decisions for Chernobyl. And she was like, no, this is a major problem. We need to get on it. And he was like, no, I don't think it's a major problem. This is what I say. And she was like, well, you were a shoe salesman before you had this position. You're only in this position because of the party. I'm a nuclear scientist and I have to listen to you. And he said, yeah, that's how it works.
Yeah.
It's kind of the same thing.
It is. One funny thing I was about to mention right before that, the nuclear reactor problem I mentioned earlier in Taishan, southern China, it was a state company, but it was a joint venture with a French company. And so what companies are seeing is like, you're having to deal with these weird party problems. This weird shadow bureaucracy in China is now sort of getting in the middle of all of these major transactions, joint ventures, and companies that have joint ventures in the auto industry, whole swaths of the Chinese economy. They're going to start to have a lot more problems with this. And they're probably not going to realize it for a little while until it percolates up. But it's a major problem. One thing I will say, the difference between Chernobyl and China now, it's again hard for the U.S. The Communist Party is extraordinarily corrupt and has enormous problems. But roughly speaking, it's actually not that incompetent. Like the people are actually well trained. They're not like bizarre. Like they do go to bizarre schools. They're learning about Xi Jinping thought and stuff. But they're actually educated, and they're educated, and they're typically have technical and scientific degrees. That's what China prides itself on, and they're relatively competent. It's not like a total like you're a shoe salesman, like you used to work in the fields and now you're running a giant multi-tenant office building in Beijing. No,
that's true. I remember like 6 of the 7 Politburo members at one point had computer science backgrounds, and I'm not sure what it is right now. And they have like a huge number. So I sort of on my show as well, I've mentioned, kind of joked about how China is going to kick our ass in certain fields, and it's largely because of the scale of how many scientists they have and computer scientists they have and things of that nature. And that's their advantage. But these are the problems, and a lot of people know those things, but these are the problems: the demography, the resource issue, the lack of food issue that no one talks about because they're more long-term challenges, but they're way bigger. They're truly significant. And also, I think we mentioned it, but in regards to the energy issue with the whole Malacca Strait and stuff. So China's Navy is also a bit overblown. It's great, but arguably Japan's is better, right? And compared to ours, it's like, I think we have like 13 aircraft carriers and another 30, what they call amphibious assault ships. And China has 2 old-fashioned aircraft carriers compared to ours. And their ships aren't even that great compared to the Japanese. And then they have to go through, to get anything they want, they have to go through like 10 different countries that hate them all the way to the other side of the world to get resources or anything they want. So I think that's kind of a big issue as well. They can't, because they want to be a aggressive hegemonic force. They want to be able to, ideally tell their neighbors to fuck off, like this is what we're doing. But at the same time, they need all these neighbors because they have to pass through them. They need these neighbors to buy their goods, and their population is dwindling in size. So it's just their challenges are pretty immense.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. And I also push back a bit on that tech. China has so many scientists, China has so many technical wizards that it's going to advance farther in the technology sense. Well, actually, what we're seeing is that the Communist Party is extremely wary of technology these days. I mean, what's going on? Right. They're clamping down on some of their most innovative companies, and the reason is, roughly speaking, China no longer sees things like WeChat or Tencent's platform, or Alibaba, or even Huawei and other these companies. They're looking for real technology. So when we were talking so we think of technology as information technologies, right?
Right.
Historically, China thinks of technology as like flood control technologies and transportation technologies. That's part of the reason they have investment. Like, they've had more capital investment in infrastructure in the last 30 years than like the rest of the world for like the last 40. Right. It's insane. But this focus on technology, on actually acquiring technologies from around the world, on trying to basically make China self-sufficient in technology, is actually the overriding force in Chinese policy right now. It's this attempt at self-sufficiency. Because like you said, Navy's not great. China is not an expeditionary Navy that's meant to go around the world. Right? The US could do that because, Mexico and like nothing the US has is related to Mexico and Canada, right? Everything China has, believe it or not, the entire Chinese Navy is designed to conquer Taiwan. That's actually what it's for. And I personally don't think that would succeed, to be honest.
I was going to ask that. Why do you think? So they went back on their agreement with England in terms of Hong Kong's autonomy. They took it over. Was after 25 years, basically, which they weren't supposed to do. Is Taiwan on their radar? Why haven't they gone more aggressive with respect to Taiwan? What do you think the likelihood is that they attempt to take over Taiwan in 10, 20 years?
All right. Well, I'm glad you gave the longer time frame instead of like people like tomorrow, they're going to do it tomorrow. No. So yeah, what you said with Hong Kong is correct. So Hong Kong, let's be honest, basically Margaret Thatcher kind of put a poison pill in this whole thing. She's like, haha, you have to get Taiwan, but it's a democracy now. Hong Kong was not a democracy until they decided to give it to China. So that's what it is. But what's happening in Hong Kong is pretty horrific. But that also poisoned the waters for Taiwan. I mean, peaceful reconciliation with Taiwan. Right. Well, we just saw what happened in Hong Kong. That's over. So China is very focused on its domestic internal audience, and it has a lot of domestic propaganda. Basically everything you see with fighter pilots and all these, things circling around Taiwan, that's mostly domestic propaganda and to kind of like push at other people, right? But mainly for the domestic audience.
Say, oh yeah, we're strong, we're good.
Exactly. Yeah. This is one of the key things people need to understand with China. China spends more on domestic propaganda than external affairs and external foreign relations and diplomacy, any of that. It spends more on internal security than on its foreign military. Like, it's enormously concerned with trying to keep the internal Chinese population united together on the same team. And so you always have to piece out, is China doing this because it's trying to actually say something to the rest of the world, or is this doing this because it's for basically its domestic audience? And that's a challenge, but the Taiwan stuff is typically that. But the real question is, why haven't they taken Taiwan? Well, the basic reason is because the US Navy never allowed them to. Mao would have grabbed 500,000 rowboats and shipping boats and fishing boats and rolled out to Taiwan if he'd had his way. Yeah. But he could not, right? The US Navy prevented it, and that has been the story ever since. And that's been the story basically through the 90s. Even Bill Clinton sort of, sailed aircraft carriers through the Taiwan Strait. Now we're kind of in a different era, right? So you were referencing sort of the US Navy and the Chinese Navy and the relative capacities and stuff. And well, personally, I think that the U.S. sort of naval policy vis-a-vis China is kind of totally misguided. And it's sort of a weird Cold War, like we're going to try and hustle. Let's go right up in, for example, well, I'll get back to your question. This question about Taiwan, what's going to happen is China going to do it in 10 to 20 years. China is almost certainly, if there's one place it wants more than anything else, it's Taiwan. Taiwan would physically make China larger than the United States if it actually controlled Taiwan. It would just cross over like the physical threshold. Right, okay. It would give it access to the rest of the Pacific. I mean, it's great. It's also just so ingrained in the domestic propaganda.
Well. Yeah.
Semiconductors, all this stuff. The problem is that no one has ever tried to do an amphibious invasion of a modern industrial advanced economy with 30 million people. Right. And I mean, they could lose up to a third of their military trying to do this. Yeah. And if the US got involved, like literally all you have to do is mine the Taiwan Strait. because to invade something with amphibious operation, you need to flow ships back and forth forever. You're constantly bringing fuel, you're bringing more troops, you're bringing more supplies. Because it's not just like, hey, we got Normandy and then we stopped bringing people in. It was like, no, we have the beach, and then you just keep never ending amount of
right.
And that's what they'd have to do. So basically Taiwan is using the exact Chinese strategy against China. So what China does in the Western Pacific is basically called the military calls it anti-access and area denial. Basically it means prevent the US Navy from getting near us, right? And so current US policy is like, let's make our Navy be able to get near them, which makes sense. But basically China's trying to push the US Navy out. And actually that's exactly what Taiwan's trying to do to China. So what they are focused on is massive amounts of missiles and basically preventing a continuous invasion. And it's actually a much easier thing to do. And if the US wanted, you could give Taiwan an enormous amount of missiles and make it impossible to invade Taiwan. There's all sorts of things about electronic stuff, and you could do all this, but bloody war. And this is the likelihood that, and the big reason why China hasn't done this, if it loses this war, right? Or if it gets stymied, or if it gets stuck, or if it seems like it's not a decisive victory, oh my God. And the Chinese Communist Party is built on the perception of competence. If it looks incompetent, then its legitimacy plummets. That is the equation. It looks like the Chinese nation just got punched in the mouth by a small island. It's very hard from that. And that's a huge reason why they haven't ever invaded yet. And, that could push them back. They have timeline, right? They want to do this by, is it 2035 or 2045? It's either at minimum 2049, which is the 100th anniversary of the Communist Revolution. That's when they want all of China united in a glorious, prosperous place. That's for sure. So the U.S., China's not trying to do this in the next 2 years. It has no interest. It has way bigger problems.
Right, of course.
But it does want to slowly develop the capabilities. It wants the U.S. to slowly atrophy economically, politically, militarily during this period, and then hopefully get to that point, 10, 15 plus years from now. Hopefully at the same time able to somehow integrate Taiwan into its system or into its orbit. But let's be honest. These things are pulling apart really rapidly. So it is possible something could escalate, but right now we're seeing Japan is basically saying, hey, looks like we're going to decide that any kind of attack on Taiwan kind of feels like an attack on the stability of the region. So we might get involved.
Right. And Korea's obviously no joke either. They're trained by us as well.
Yeah. Navies are tough, man. Navies are harder. They're more difficult to maintain, and they're than anything else. So it's very difficult. China's never really had a navy. First Chinese navy was actually built to basically patrol the Yangtze in the Sung dynasty. But it's never been able to do it. It's just it's too rough. It's too rough a region in the maritime sphere, and any attempt to break out and China is going to probably have to. It starts a domino. To Taiwan, suddenly you're going to probably have problems with Japan, and on and on. And
and then you have all sorts of economic sanctions from all your neighbors. Yeah, a really good point you raised. I never really thought about, and it's one thing I think Westerners have a trouble with is the emphasis on saving face with the Chinese culture. And so even any invasion of Taiwan, best case scenario for them is going to be a drawn out, bloody, fierce battle with missiles coming back and forth. And that alone is enough to humiliate them, at least in their eyes, with respect to their population. It's not exactly the same with respect to Western liberal democracies, right? Like if something's drawn out, it's not, you don't necessarily fear that, if the motives are right, that, your country's going to overthrow you or anything like that, right? It's like, obviously the Vietnam War was very humiliating at parts and bloody, and people coming back in coffins, and there was internal turmoil for that, but you didn't fear that, the entire governance of the United States would be upended because of the Vietnam War, right? Like, so with China, they actually do fear that, right? If they get just a similar situation.
Yeah, we trade we assume our government is stupid and incompetent. It's going to mess most things up.
Right,
we rebel at every given moment, right?
Exactly.
We've come to accept it.
Right.
China's very different. And the big thing that this face thing is important. You need massive perception control. You need to control the entire internet, the perception of the whole war, everything going on. They have to do this whole thing. And then what China really worries about is sort of the chain reaction. So suddenly you have a war. Suddenly your energy systems are are compromised. Suddenly you can't fertilize or irrigate your
Right,
land.
right.
This is the
You can't sell your goods.
This is the story also for people want to know, like, how do Chinese states fail since the last 3,500 years? It is almost always a chain reaction of things like this. I mean, forget invasions. Invasions were a big one. You know, the barbarians would burst through the passes. Leaving that aside, you had agricultural breakdown, you had economic dysfunction, you had political chaos, right?
Yeah.
What happens if Xi Jinping dies right now? Boom. While we were talking, he had an aneurysm.
Yep.
Well, you know what that is? That means a battle royale between everyone else at the top. The way that China transitions power is a cute way to think about it is basically since the 1970s, they do it through like a blessing and a purge. So basically a bunch of party elders get together, they bless one new person to be a leader. That new leader decides to purge everyone who could be a rival, and then you do it again and again. Xi Jinping is a much tougher situation, so he's purging nonstop, right? It's not like a one-time purge, it's a perma-purge, right? With Xi Jinping. And what that means is that you have a very flat government structure at the top, and it means massive chaos if something goes wrong. So that's one thing that we're seeing is it's actually become like it's the same thing you were talking about. Like if Biden died tomorrow, a lot of people probably think that this was planned, but other than that, they would say, well, you know, the next person goes and you move on, right? That's what happens. There's nothing else. In China, it's not like that. And it's so hard for us to realize that there's massive strength at the top, but there's this question of power transitions is the perennial problem of Chinese states. And there's only been one like peaceful, easy power transition since 1949. It was actually Hu Jintao, which you referenced earlier. Everything else has been a bloody struggle behind the scenes. You know, you have like the old guys, whole cohort is there, and they're not willing to give up power. The new guys like slowly working his way. It's just pathetic. I mean, it's not pathetic. It's like it is so foreign to what we know as a political system that we assume a lot of strengths where there's actually like fundamental weaknesses that we don't even think it's possible, really, because we're so like you said, like if a bunch of people in the government died, the slot fills, you get a new election in a couple of years, la-di-da.
Right.
It's very hard to come back from. But that question, so you always need to be super competent, and it's very true. It's just very true that. Yeah.
Have you ever seen those Chinese those what are they called? Oh man, they're like the mooncakes that they use for the autumn festival in Chinese New Year.
I've had some of those.
And they're like seven. It's like a box of like 6 of them in like the most like immaculate gift wrapping, and they taste like, you know, like a pastry you get at Starbucks or something, but it's like $300 for like 6 of the cakes. You seen that?
I was getting some in Hangzhou, but I don't think they did not spend that much money on me.
Yeah, I had so you know, I've had Chinese friends, and they would give me one of these like autumn festival or like mooncakes and things, and they'd be like from Neiman Marcus or wherever, you know, and it's all about saving face. Like the actual pastry isn't anything special, tastes like anything else, you know, but like it's in the most immaculate gift wrapping you've seen, and you give it to, you know, the people that you love or who you want to you know, win favor with or whatever it is, as a good gesture. And it's all about saving face. It's like so foreign to me. It's like, oh my God, like you spent like $150 for this like box of 6 pastries, you know. But it goes to that whole concept that I think we have difficult understanding with how important rituals are, and presenting a good image, you know. It's very interesting.
Yeah, you know, funny enough, just bringing up rituals, Confucianism, all that, which nobody understands, roughly speaking. It just sounds like weird moral preaching from long ago. Yeah. You know, that Confucius and the Confucians, all of them, they originally called way back in the day, they were called the ritualists, believe it or not.
Oh, okay.
It was all focused on ritual. It was about how we can use ritual to organize the naturally chaotic Chinese system into something socially integrated, functional, and hierarchical. That's what it's about. And it goes to, in the modern context, what we see is that all these gift giving, all these culture things, first of all, there's all sorts of just celebratory holidays and all that kind of stuff, but there's also the fact that China is a bit of a low trust society, to say the least. The cultural background that China is ginning it up right now. Do you know what I mean? Like in the during the Mao era, it was like, get rid of Confucius, get rid of Chinese history, you know, to go back, and then you're like, what's modern, what's this? It's been a tumultuous like struggle to try and figure out, what do you keep from the past, what do you not do, like what about your past, is that region, is it even part of China, like aren't you kind of independent back then, didn't you have your own culture and your own language? It's a whole thing that's it's very propagandized, like from the top down,
right
and this problem of low trust is a real thing in China. And I mean, even what we're talking about with the political system, I think you could argue that is there low trust between people? Would you say that there's low trust? So for example, if you compare, the Japanese are like the most, it's fascinating, they're like the most trusting
I've ever seen in terms of the
Yeah,
way
it's
their society works, right?
remarkable.
There'll be like a natural disaster, a flood or something, and all the stores will be derelict and beat up and just
Nothing gets taken,
windows
right?
smashed and nothing's taken. No one loots. No one even even if they could get away with it, no one does anything. Like no one steals. People carry around their own like little like trash cans because there's no, there's like no trash cans anywhere, and they carry to like dispose of their own trash. Like it's such a just trusting and like cohesive society. Is China not like that?
No.
Okay.
Japan is very cohesive and integrated and culturally united, and
Right.
it's Japanese and Japan, right? You think, oh, the Chinese are in China. China is a mass of many different regions that are only occasionally united. Southern China they speak different languages. They look different. So people, if you ask any Chinese person the difference between people from southern and northern China, most of them can tell you right away. And let alone the Uyghurs and the Tibetans and all of this.
Right.
There's even the Chinese language. There is no Chinese language, spoken language. There's a Chinese written language that everyone uses to write. That's actually the primary way that China's been integrated together. The spoken language is a massive amount of mutually unintelligible languages. They're called dialects in China. That's propaganda.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. So the early Mao era, they did a lot of things to integrate the country. They simplified the Chinese written language to make it easier to write. It used to be like hundreds of strokes, not hundreds, but lots of strokes for each character, each word, colonial word. And then they started to mandate Mandarin Chinese, which is roughly speaking the Beijing dialect for the rest of the country. And but I mean, linguistic variation and diversity is a sign of typically of cultural, economic, political diversity as well. And that's what we see in China. So this is not like Japan. The Sichuan region in China had its own culture for 1,000 years before it ever integrated with China. The Yangtze region, it wasn't integrated until after the Han Dynasty. Over 400 years, it wasn't the same region. I mean, all of it wasn't integrated probably till the 800 AD.
Right.
China tried to colonize Vietnam for over 1,000 years. That failed. It's just on and on.
There's also like the Manchu people, right?
The Manchu people, that was never part of China until the Manchus took over China.
Right.
It was like part of the Ming Dynasty. Not really. That was mostly BS. But and so it's the Manchus conquered China and they got Manchuria as well. But it is not integrated in the same way. And so that's what comes out. Like it's not, you're not going to get trust in regions that have never talked to each other, don't have economic connections, don't have real cultural connections outside of language and a progressively shared history. It's very difficult. And so you've also had a hustle culture in China for 30 years, right? You hustle, make it big, make it this, make it that. There's a lot of scamming, a lot of like, for example, a real estate's a great example. Let's say you and I built a building in Beijing, and we built it, and then within a couple months, we could have sold the rights, whether in pieces or in whole, to like dozens of different entities. Like boom, it's like, oh, hey, we did it, and then like slowly we're like shifted to the side, and like all these other people get in the middle of it, right? And then finally you have someone at the end. It's just you're doing it, but then you're sending it away and sending it away. It's you don't see that in the U.S. to that extent.
Well, of course, yeah. And now that you mentioned that, I'm reminded of all the Chinese scam companies that have gone public. There was. You also had what's one of the most prominent ones? Luckin, right? So I remember one of my buddies was investing in Luckin, and I read into them, and I was like, dude, the chief marketing officer is currently in jail while they're going public, and he's still listed as the chief marketing officer, and he was just such a pump and dump scheme. And I assume they're still around, but it went bananas because everyone's like, oh, this is a new Chinese Starbucks. And they were like growing like, I don't know, 20 stores a day or some shit. And I was like, this is not,
they don't even
marketing officer in jail. They don't even like, what's going on here? This is complete bullshit. And then there are several of these companies where they would in the public markets where they didn't even exist. They would bring the investors over from like Europe and America for their shareholders meetings and stuff. And then I remember Citron Research was one of the people who uncovered a few of these. They're like the famous short sellers. And they left people behind to basically record the factories. And they would see these barren factories like a couple days before the foreigners came in, turn the lights on, put people in there, and make it look like it's a real legitimate enterprise. Then they leave and then it's abandoned the factory again. So yeah, that makes sort of sense. Last thing I want to ask you is, what do you think about China 2020s? What's it going to look like? Are we going to be seeing some of these problems manifest themselves this decade? Do you anticipate significant upheavals or tumults or changes? with respect to their position in the world or internally?
Yeah, I think people should get in for a wild ride. I mean, this is going to be really the make it or break it decade. It really is. Whether it's the tech side of things, the 2010s was this whole Chinese, we're going to expand, go out to the rest of the world. Great national champions are becoming global champions, and then well, we see that actually it's closing back. These are now going to be purely Chinese champions. China's trying to pull everything back into China, and the question is whether this country, like we talked about, with all its massive 600 cities and the enormous industrial base, if all of this can be sustained as it tries to become a nation of one, right? Like a self-sufficient nation, which it can be. A lot of things should come to a head this decade. So I always caution people, you don't want to go, I mean, unless you're trying to short sell or something, you're trying to like make a buck off of this, like go for it. But it's hard to know like where the hammer is going to fall. You know what I mean? Like
the black swan events.
Yeah, it's like there's a lot of problems in China, but they're able to keep. So a big thing to keep in mind is that the new technological capacity in China, like I was saying, it's kind of shifting away from this global, internet platform stuff. Where it's really going is social control and surveillance. I mean, there's like insane innovation, if you want to call it that, going on in this area, and it's allowing them to control their population in ways that have never happened before. So the Chinese state falls when the Chinese people typically break out into rebellion in some form or another, and there's new capacity to prevent this. Like China's never had really. So the pandemic is a great example. The pandemic response in China was not a public health response. This mobilized the internal security resources that China has been building for over 20 or 30 years. It's I have a podcast episode on people really interested, but it's a massive sort of grid system that is locking every neighborhood, every house, every city, every state down into a system of organized and monitored controls, both human, both digital, both algorithmic, both all of this. And it's unprecedented. And this could allow for a lot of things to keep going. I mean, China could easily keep going, assuming no other challenge in the rest of the world till 2025 without a problem. But I do see, towards the end of the decade, it seems like it'd be very unlikely if things are able to keep going the way they are. Will this mean like a total breakdown in society? Hard to know, right? I mean, if you can keep energy coming into China, if you can keep basic systems functioning, agriculture, transportation, real estate, finance, etc., you could hobble along. But China's also running out of growth. So the basic thing is that if your economy is shrinking, population is shrinking, and your land is kind of dying, you're going to be relying on technology for everything. And soon enough, that comes with a cost, right? I mean, what the new technologies can actually lower the cost of social control. So you think about it as, if you use surveillance and AI, you can lower the per capita cost of making someone do what you want them to do, right? That's the social credit score. That's like, I'm going to give you micro incentives to make you do all of these things. I'm give you a bunch of minor kind of marginal little improvements, like $1 off at the, coffee, a little slightly cheaper plane ticket, train ticket, whatever. But if the idea is you can, again,
the AI can tell between everybody as well. It's unbelievably sophisticated. It can tell how you walk. And if it can distinguish between Chinese people, it can distinguish between anyway, right?
I mean, so those are all developed. Those tools were developed in Xinjiang to control the Muslim population.
That's right.
There. And now it's being spread. Not only, okay, let's be real here. This is being spread throughout China, but it's also being spread to everyone in the West. So they're trying to create profiles for basically everyone around the world as well. As their situation gets worse, they know that greater knowledge will help them in future conflicts. So that's where things are going. And it's not, I wouldn't be very optimistic about things for China. I don't encourage people to go to China much anymore. I didn't go the last opportunity I had. I don't feel comfortable. Well, obviously I kind of say this kind of stuff, so I'm probably less so the average person, but yeah, it's, we need a new story. The United States is investing everything in let's man up to confront China. That's particularly on the right. The best way they think to mobilize people to get anything done, right? We got, whether it's, we need to go to the moon because China's going to the moon, or we need to improve energy because China's doing this, or we need to get rid of TikTok and make a clone because China did it. Like, it's just on everything because it's the typical pattern from the Cold War. The Soviet Union was the nemesis, and we, managed to create NASA, go to the moon, all this kind of stuff to combat it. And we're trying to do the same thing, but realistically, we need to find a better, internal narrative, internal mobilizing and motivating force that can move things forward, because you're actually going to need the United States by itself, self-generating its own, forward momentum into the future, because other countries, including China, aren't going to do it.
Yeah, I mean, that's always a challenge. I think it's always one of the things I think advantages of having China's rise, if there were any, was that hopefully it was going to mobilize Americans to be more united and come together against this adversary. But is it a bit overblown? It may be, but I still think it's valuable to not underestimate China, because we did before.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Screwed up. So I think it's worth being, overly cautious about everything they do. Particularly, I think with the capital markets thing. That's one of the things I'm going to be very curious about. I think we need to be more aggressive in terms of not letting them list on our public markets. I think on the Chinese side, they're probably going to do that anyways, because they seem to be pulling back from the whole international financial community. And I think that's not going to work out well for them. And honestly, I mean, so many Americans get screwed over by these investments in capital markets with these Chinese companies. It's only through direct investment, but the pension funds invest in them and things of that nature. So that's one of the things I'm going to be looking for as well. I think that's going to hurt them. But yeah, I mean, I think we certainly have much better cards, and China has a lot of problems that aren't discussed as we mentioned. But I think they're very formidable. They have a lot of brilliant people, and it's worth taking them seriously at the very least.
Yeah, definitely. I wasn't trying to. I actually was going to say I actually kind of agree with that. The conservative, not when it gets overblown, but conservative argument that, hey, let's use this as an opportunity to kind of get our shit together. Yeah. Why not? Because our shit isn't together. Anyone that's trying to do anything, it feels good to me. And I agree. It's formidable, and you should probably end this easy access stuff that is just allowing basically things to get milked from the U.S. Like the DD listing was particularly ridiculous.
The DD one?
Yeah, it's just let's just get a couple billion. All right, the state requisitions the money and then moves on. It's like, are we going to ever call this fraud or anything? Whatever. But the problem is, like, the U.S., what China's been very good at is the U.S. reacts emotionally to very, painful events. Like, we get triggered is a good way to think about it, to use a great word. 9/11, we basically got triggered and freaked out. There's no strategic anything. There was no planning anything. And then we missed bin Laden and then made up some whole thing that we're going to turn this place into a free place. And we wasted 20 years.
Turning Iraq into Belgium, yeah.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. And that's how we saw it. So China's been trying to do a lot to prevent one of these blow-ups, right? So Taiwan or Japan, it's always tried to keep a low profile, although it's no longer doing that anymore. The new ambassador to China is not interested in that. China's already realized that the U.S. relationship is on the decline permanently, and that's true. We kind of probably missed the moment to really end things. We're kind of just going to slowly walk it all back. I think we are going to do the financial and capital markets thing. That's probably coming. Decoupling, financial, technological decoupling are coming for both sides now. Yeah. Like, it's not just the U.S. And that's the world. So, I mean, people should be ready for, like I was saying, it's going to be an interesting ride for sure.
Cool. All right, man. Well, it's been a amazing discussion. So interesting. I learned so much. Thanks so much for coming on. Where can people find you?
Yeah, so check out, I have a website, just jasonszeftel.com. I have random things I write. You go check those out, find them on the website and elsewhere. I have a YouTube channel where I do some things. Right now, it's basically just some live streams. I don't quite have the time to do that, but I'm going to do more videos pretty soon. And what else? Oh, for people who are interested in basically the framework to how to kind of think through this stuff, one of the things that I've noticed basically over the last 10 years is that we're basically losing our journalistic cohort of people. Like, the journalists are kind of disappearing, like both blogging and the
real journalists,
all gone, right? The economic structure doesn't work, and the incentives don't work, and the ideology stuff doesn't work. So if you want to understand international affairs and stuff, you kind of need to develop a framework. So as I've been doing all these podcasts, I've been getting the same sort of answers and questions, and I've been putting together some basic stuff about why countries are the way they are. And just basically for people who reach now, it's going to just be a free course at the beginning, and it'll just be, like we've been talking about. Why does the country have as many people as it does? Why does it have persistent military conflict or not? Why does it develop this type of military? Why does it develop this sort of culture? Like, it's real that, Mexicans are Mexicans, and there's stereotypes are often caricatures, but there's also some kernel of truth in all these things. Germans are very precise. Anyone who's gone around the world, that is true. And we want to get an understanding of why these things are the way they are, so we don't walk through, we don't we're like a leaf in the wind, like during a storm, because no one's ever telling us what's really going on. So that's cool. So anyone could, email me or get on the mailing list, check that out. But otherwise, I think those are most of the places.
Very cool. Okay, I will put your website in the show notes so people can check you out.
Oh, and the podcast. I do have the China Unraveled podcast.
Okay, I'll put that in there as well.
Awesome.
All right, man. Thanks so much for coming on.
Yeah, no, it was great.
If you enjoyed our show, please click subscribe to stay up to date with our YouTube channel and podcast, and give us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts so we can keep delivering guys some great content. Thanks again, and we will be back next week.
Aw, man.
And probably 6 robots. We stand for a free and open debate and exchange of ideas. And if you disagree with anything we talk about, you are a racist and no better than Hitler.
What?
Let's get started.